Hey folks, Riley here down in the Vista Outdoor booth. Super excited to be with Chris Laack from Federal CCI Spear.
Yeah.
You're a product line manager
for
handgun ammunition, which is exciting for him because what we're here to talk about is the new 30 Super Carry, which we have here behind us, some demonstration and some
Brand
visuals.
New cartridge,
Had the opportunity at the range yesterday to shoot a fair amount of this actually, a couple different times, both at a Smith & Wesson event and the industry day, and which was good because I wanted to be able to get my hands on a little bit and really get a feel for it, you know, beyond just shooting 5 rounds or whatever.
Right, yeah.
And so I do feel like, you know, we gave it a fair shake so far. Super excited now to learn from the master about kind of how this came to be.
Right.
You know, what like, first of all, like what inspired this? And then kind of talk to us a little bit about the development and what you were trying to achieve.
So everything we do is to market need, right? So the customers ask for something or there's some need that the market has. Obviously, for the US market, the biggest thing is personal protection, personal defense. Mm-hmm. And there's been some really obvious trends in that as far as going to small micro guns with larger capacities, or just the ability to have good concealability and still have something that you can kind of carry around with you but use for home defense. So we were really focused on that market, right?
Yeah.
And typically we've developed loads with old cartridges that have been around for a long time.
Right.
But with everything we've learned about how to make ammunition, the modern way we make ammunition, we figured it was time to design a cartridge from the ground up. Like, what do we want to do for this market? If we were today, with what we know about how we make ammo, going to make a cartridge for today.
Yeah.
And that's where 30 Super Carry came. So part of the how we came to the conclusion of where we wanted it to be was there's 2 families of terminal performance kind of families within calibers, cartridges. So there's everything up to and including 380, which is kind of in this little family of sub calibers, right? So, but it never quite gets to where the FBI, for example, considers good lethality and effective type of cartridge. So we've got some really good 380s, but we're always limited to what that design for that cartridge can achieve.
Absolutely.
So we've got that, and then there's this jump to 9mm, and then the 9mm and up, you have another family where you get small incremental gains as you go up in cartridge size, different calibers. Yeah. But 9 is where, you know, as the FBI will state, it's all terminal effectiveness is about placement, penetration, and expansion in that order, right? So if we focused on that, what can we do with a modern cartridge? If we go to a smaller diameter, we can get more rounds in the gun, or we can make the gun smaller. Yeah. Increases the chance of somebody having it with them when they need it, makes it more concealable, or having additional rounds, more opportunities to affect a threat, right? Hits are what win the gunfights, more opportunity for more hits. So it's either to give you more rounds or to give you a smaller package, right? So that was kind of the thought behind it. There is no parent cartridge. We designed it from the ground up. We're cognizant of other stuff that's in the market, but really this one was, we started prototyping early on, just with the idea of it being smaller diameter. It started at 30, 312 is where we ended up settling for the actual cartridge. And that was because we were getting good terminal performance, we were getting good accuracy. It's working better than we ever expected it could. So what we're seeing is 9mm type terminal performance, especially if you're comparing it to like grain weights in 9 or similar things like that. So we're getting 9mm terminal out of something smaller, so you can get more rounds and more concealability.
So no, that's a great point. So did you look at or kind of experiment with some other diameters of cartridges? Or okay.
Yeah, we played with a bunch of different stuff and iterate down.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Settled at that 312.
Yeah, and the same with the grain weights. Yeah.
Gotcha. And now, could you actually touch on that a little bit? What are kind of the common grain weights that you guys are manufacturing bullets in? Yeah,
so for 30 Super Carry, we're doing 100 grain for the Federal HST, and then the Gold Dot will have a 115 grain. So staying kind of in that range.
Which,
for the launch.
Is perhaps a bit on the heavy for caliber side.
Yeah.
But I mean, relatively speaking, you look at other similar things in that category. Like even a common 380 is what, 95, maybe 100.
Yeah, our
90
HST's a 99, our Hydroshock Deep's 99.
Yeah, so we're a bit smaller in diameter, but still kind of maintaining the weight there, but generating still pretty good velocities.
Yeah, better sectional density.
Yep.
For the grain weight, right? Because of just the way that bullet, the nature of that bullet.
Yeah.
And then, so the HST and American Eagle, out of a 4-inch test barrel, 1250 velocities, and then the Gold Dot at the 115 is about 1150 velocity.
Now is that where you settled at with velocities? Is that kind of pushing the envelope a little bit, or was that kind of sort of more of a sweet spot that you guys, as you tested different things, you're like trying to balance I'm sure obviously recoil energy and all that sort of stuff too, but tell us a little bit about that.
And terminal performance too, because faster doesn't make a terminal bullet in the handgun calibers, right? Necessarily, it can help, but it's kind of our means to the end. So, because we knew kind of the size of guns that it was going to be based on, we wanted to perform down slower, and then we wanted to perform well as you go up in caliber. But if you focus too much on too much speed, then you change your approach to terminal design, right? The hollow point geometry, the sky, everything. So, because if you push it too fast, then it expands too fast. You get hyper expansion, really big upsets, but you lose penetration depth.
Right.
And so it's really about knowing that this is going to be for carry-sized guns. Focus on that first, but then make sure it works in everything.
Yeah. So now with some cartridges, there's relatively narrow performance envelope. I mean, how does this one compare as far as to that point, different sized guns? Say maybe even a 2 3/4 inch barrel versus a 4-inch or 4.5 inch. I mean, we got the Nighthawk custom gun that's a little bit longer barreled. We got a couple things out there a little bit shorter. So, I mean, how generous is it in that performance envelope?
It can handle everything you're going to have in a handgun.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the numbers shift around a little bit, just based on obviously how fast things like that, and bare gel, heavy clothing. The numbers kind of shift, but it's going to work in everything.
Cool.
Yep.
That's awesome. Now, so we have behind here, I mean, here's some test gel, or at least a simulation of it.
Yep.
I mean, what are we seeing penetration-wise typically?
So it's right around that 12.5 inches through in bare gel, the calibrated, true FBI calibrated organic gel, ballistics gel, then in about 12.5. Okay. And then through the heavy clothing, we're actually getting more in the 15.5 inch range. So in that kind of sweet spot of the 14 to 16 that you want to be in. So through heavy clothing, really good. Bare gel, it opens dramatically pretty quick because of the velocity. So that's why you see that big difference. But it still meets that 12 inch, and it had to get there, right? That was our goal, was for it to get there.
So this is, I mean, how consistent is it? I mean, obviously you're going to work with an average, if you will, but are we pretty consistently ending up there? We're getting We've done a couple of demos so far, and they laugh at me when I do the demo because they're shooting behind me, and I'm telling them what they're going to see and what the measurements are going to be. They shoot. Somebody goes and measure it, and it's you're like, oh, that's probably about 12 3/4.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So very, very consistent, and that's part of why we use the FBI protocol and those materials, so that you can have a high level of confidence that that's going to correlate to effectiveness in the field, because there's so much data and everything that goes into how we pick that, as opposed to, it's not necessarily literal numbers, this correlates to the effectiveness in the widest known parameters.
Yeah, I know there's some people that kind of get tore up a bit about, well, that's just gel and that's not reality, but there's a reason why we use a gel, and there's a way that correlates to real,
this and gel
performance.
Equals all these things factored into reality. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So we got, Federal released the cartridge, but we've got CCI Blazer that's making ammunition for it. We've got Remington, UMC, and HTP.
Yep.
We've got Spear with the Gold Dot, which is awesome. And then even within Federal, there's some FMJ ammo as well, practice target ammo as well as the HST.
Correct. Yeah. So there'll be a 100 grain HST with a 100 grain American Eagle. So you got your training equivalent. Spear in the Lewiston plant, they're going to be making the Gold Dot, which is a 115, and then they'll do a Blazer 115, so you have a training equivalent. And then Remington is making a 100 grain HTP and a 100 grain UMC as a training equivalent there too.
Yep. Yeah. And then tell me a little bit about so obviously a little bit of a different approach between the Gold Dot and the HST design, as far as, a bit heavier there in the case of the Gold Dot. Was there some logic there, or what are we seeing kind of performance-wise between those two very, very popular defensive rounds?
Yeah, so the Gold Dot being a bonded bullet, it's really robust, needs a little more juice, opens a little slower just as a result. So the Gold Dot, you're seeing a little bit smaller upsets, but better overall penetration and barrier performance, right?
Yeah.
So it's just the nature of that bonded bullet across a bunch of different barrier spectrums. So it's kind of a couple different performance types, both well within where we want them to be, just a different approach from the bonded versus the mechanical bonding, the cantilever on the HST, the chemical bonding of the Unicore. Yeah, so it's just a little bit different approach to get to the same end. Yeah, so the extra mass, a little less velocity, better barrier performance with the Gold Dot and the bonding. The HST, really good bare gel through heavy clothing, and works a little bit better through different velocity ranges, just to the nature, because it opens so much easier. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the expansion you're seeing and measuring, especially as compared to comparable bullets in the 9mm caliber.
Yeah, we're seeing essentially the same expansion. You're starting with a smaller diameter, so through heavy clothing is a good example. The 9 gets bigger, but through heavy clothing, out of the same size gun, our 124 grain HST tends to be in the 5.7 to 0.6 kind of range, whereas the 100 grain HST super carries in the 5.3, maybe a little bit bigger than that through heavy clothing.
Yeah.
So a little bit less upset size. That being said, the super carry penetrates another inch deeper. And those two things kind of go hand in hand, right? So,
absolutely does.
But then if you compare it to, say, other 9mm in market, we're actually getting as much expansion with super carry as some of the popular 9mm defensive rounds in market, and better penetration depth. So it's actually blowing right by anything with a similar grain weight in market in 9. It's blowing right by all of that.
Yeah.
Super carry. So,
essentially the slightly heavy for caliber 30 super carry compared to the light for caliber 9mm, for instance. I mean, and that makes sense, I would say, actually. That computes in my brain. Excellent. So obviously, I mean, so designed from the ground up, new cartridge, modern propellants, modern technology, all of that. Like you said, I'll be honest, I was intrigued hearing you say that, I mean, obviously you're aware of other cartridges that have come before, but this really was, let's try to just design from the ground up and choose the best of all worlds.
Yeah. Don't paint yourself into a corner, right?
Yeah.
Try and stick with something that's, if we're going to build it, just knowing what we know, if we're going to build it today and not kind of stick ourselves into one particular way, just how would you do it, build it from the ground up, and super carry is that,
Yeah. Well, let's wrap this up by flipping to the other side of this display and talk about some of the new guns that are chambered in 30 super carry. So we know that the 30 super carry right from the get-go is supported by some guns from a couple of major manufacturers. Which is really, that's a good thing, obviously, when you're trying to introduce a new cartridge. We have some offerings from Smith & Wesson in the case of the Shield Plus EZ and the Shield Plus, which I have had some time shooting on and found those to be quite enjoyable platforms, as well as a couple entries here from Nighthawk Custom, which, I'll be honest, I was like, I saw the press release and I was like, Nighthawk, wow, okay, you know. But that's I mean, obviously Nighthawk makes a great quality gun, and they're known for their 1911s, which is a single stack gun, and I'll tell you, there's a benefit to be gained, you know, when you're kind of right at that like 8 to 10 round threshold, and now that turns into what, 12. 10 to 12?
It's 12, yeah.
That's kind of significant in a gun design like that. So tell us about, you know, bringing on these companies and manufacturers.
So right away, these two were the ones who stepped up and moved fast. Nighthawk were the ones we worked very first proof of concepts, right?
Okay.
And they're small, nimble, open-minded, really sharp guys. And when we were talking to them right on, they're like, yeah, we're on board, this is gonna be awesome. And started working and gave us some of our initial feedback, working through things like the pressures and everything. So we had a really good back and forth development early on, just kind of, are we onto something here? And they decided to do a couple models right out the gate, which was awesome, right? Of course, they've only got so much capacity and price points are a little prohibitive to some people. So we knew we wanted a major manufacturer on board too. We've talked to many And just to put it this way, nobody said no. Everybody went, this is a great idea, we're on board. The market is crazy, so let's see kind of what we can work with. And Smith & Wesson came in right away and said, look, we've got these 2 models, they'd be a perfect fit for this. We want to work with you to get these done for SHOT Show. So they busted their butts and worked through it and made sure, and they had other major releases, right? So they found time to get it all fit in and come up with these 2 models that are harken a little more to what that original creation of the cartridge was for.
Right.
So yeah, those 2 companies stepped right up. There will be many, many more, and we're getting approached by several every day that are on board too. So this cartridge is going to be around for a while, but these 2 stepped right up, and they're working great. I've shot them all a bunch, and every one of, there isn't one of these that I wouldn't own, right? They're all great guns, and the companies did a really good job supporting the launch. Yeah,
that's excellent. Yeah, and that actually is really good to hear, because that was a question I was going to ask, was about other companies adopting and getting on board with this. So you're seeing some good reception that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
cool.
There will be more. It's got to make sense for their customers and their business, right? So, but everybody, the concept, everybody gets. And now that we've got all these results and we're starting to kind of walk through that stuff, everybody's on board that we've talked to so far.
Yeah.
Yep.
And again, there's a strong case to be made. This is a good demonstration of like what a standard double stack magazine looks like. Going from that 10. I mean, this is your P365s, your Shield Pluses, your Hellcats, whatever, and bam, 2 more rounds. I've always been of the opinion that a gun that carries 10 rounds is kind of about where I want to be at for my own personal minimum. And if you take 10 and stretch that to 12, that feels like it stretches. I mean, it seems like a small increase, but it actually, for me, is actually reassuring in terms of carrying those smaller guns. You got a little extra to work with there. And some of the guns, like the slightly extended magazine and the Shield Plus, gets you out to 15 rounds.
Yeah.
I mean, that's impressive.
Yeah, and it'll for those. Some people are saying, well, what about where it's limited to 10? Well, think about in the future what gun manufacturers can do, what gun they can put 10 rounds in, right? Yeah. Like this cartridge will allow them to design a gun around that and make the most effective compact gun that they can for a 10 rounder, right? So it opens up a whole bunch of possibilities for people to have a terminally effective, really controllable round that they can shoot out of all these different platforms and either have more capacity or more compact. And
So, my analysis of all this and kind of taking it all in, looking at the industry as a whole, obviously we're concealedcarry.com, very concealed carry focused. I'm just kind of curious if you agree with this assessment or not, but I feel like had you done this and introduced this, say, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it might be one thing, but I feel like where we are today, that the market, the industry, the gun products and various offerings out there in the market is kind of primed for this next step, this next evolution.
Yeah, the terminal effectiveness of the bullets would not be what it is today 20 years ago. Right? Yeah, a lot of what we know about how we make rounds today would not have made it possible back at that time period to develop something as effective as this in that same size package.
Excellent. Well, folks, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Chris. You're obviously,
likewise.
Like I said, you're the master. You're the knowledgeable one here, and it's exciting to see a new approach to this. I do hope to see where this goes. Hope to see it expand, both in terms of the ammunition offerings and as well as on the gun side, with the various firearm offerings as well. I'd love to see where this goes. I think it's an exciting time that we're in for concealed carry especially.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your time, Chris.
You bet.